Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today I have the pleasure of company of Sri Manish Pandit, also known as Dr. Manish Pandit. We all remember him from the series that we did on the dating of the Mahabharata. So before I talk about today's topic, let's first welcome Dr. Manish Pandit ji. Dr. Pandit ji, pranam and namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Sir, Jai Shri Ram and Pranam as usual. It's a pleasure to be back on the channel. I mean, I was a bit busy in the middle. Got out a few books and did a few other things, but now I'm back on the channel. Yes, absolutely.
And viewers, there's one thing that Sanatana Dharma says that any time if Dharma had to be established on the world, Bhagwan took an avatar and came down. So that is what is pictured as Dashavatara. And the Sanatanis believe that Gautama Buddha was also one such avatara. Today we are going to talk about the timeline as to when Gautama Buddha attained Nirvana. And in fact, I'm standing in front of the Wat Pho temple in Bangkok, where we have the statue of reclining Buddha, a truly majestic piece. And I think that sets up the context for our conversation today. So we go back to Dr. Manish Pandit ji as he goes through the timelines and establishes a context as to when Gautama Buddha attained Nirvana. Manish ji, so where did it all begin for you? When did you start looking at researching the dateline for Gautama Buddha? And is it anything to do with the fact that we were also talking about when Adi Shankara was born?
Right, sir. So this is such a contentious and controversial topic in the scientific community, in the community of the people who believe in Gautam Buddha, and in various other communities around the world, in dharmic communities. There is a huge debate actually about when exactly did Gautam Buddha actually live and when did he attain Nirvana, because he lived for around 80 years. So when was he present on earth? Now I started looking at this in context of the Mahabharata in 2007 and 2008 with Dr. Narari Achar. And there have been some other people who have done a lot of work on this. Notably, I think Kota Venkatchalam and some of the other scholars, they have done some work, and some other people have done epigraphic work on it. The context of this is that in 2013, Cunningham was, I think, doing excavations not that long ago, right? And he's a scholar, I believe, from Durham, and he was doing the excavations in Lumbini. And what happened is that he found that there is a radiocarbon and OSL thermoluminescence sort of data, which tells us very clearly that the Buddha would have been around longer than what was previously expected by the scientific community. So this is one thing. The other thing is in the context of Adi Shankaracharya, because the Western Indologists did some major assumptions and wrong, mistaken assumptions. They took Abhinava Shankaracharya of 7th AD to be the Adi Shankaracharya. And, so this is a massive blunder of around 1,200 years. So when you have that 1,200, 300, 1,300 year gap, imagine that 1,300 year back from the time of when we have established that Adi Shankaracharya was definitely there, which is 509 BCE, which we established in the 5th episode of PGurus last time. So now when you take it back from there, well, then you're suddenly looking at 1807 and all these sort of 1805 or 1500 BCE and so on, those sort of numbers. And scientists will not accept it unless and until there is some rigorous something, right? Whether it is archaeology, whether it is astronomy. Again, to put in context, Cunningham's work actually does show that the archaeology from that site itself is a few centuries old. And that particular thing I'm not going to show in this particular workshop because, first of all, I need to contact him and get the permission to show that sort of stuff from his paper, essentially. But I've got the paper, and one can read it as well. And so these are all the things which we have to think about very carefully. And this will cause a massive commotion in the scientific world if, from the viewpoint of astronomy, if we are able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the Buddha is living in 1800 BC or thereabouts, this will be huge, massive. I mean, it's like an atom bomb going off in the scientific community, because all of a sudden the Mahabharata then becomes absolutely certain to be dated at the 3K BC mark. And this is massive implications for Indian history, for world history, for dharma. It basically puts us on par with, like, the other sort of communities around the world, Egypt and those sort of things.
And no, what I was trying to say is to kind of briefly recap what we talked about in the 5th episode when we were talking about the dating of Mahabharata. Viewers, sometimes Dr. Pandit and I take some brief detours to go somewhere, and then we come back to the main topic. And this was one of those things where we were talking about, Chandrasekhara Saraswati, Mahaperiva, and then we talked about how he had a geologist test the samples, and then
Right.
they figured out that the river that flowed by what is considered as the house where Adi Shankara lived was indeed 2,500 years old. And the legend goes that his mother was finding it difficult to walk all the way down to the river to get the water for her daily pujas. So Adi Shankara, little Adi Shankara, turned the river, and he made the river come to their house. So, and therefore the main river, it dates back to 150,000 years, whereas this tributary is only 2,500 years. So these are the things that we brought about to try and establish that the timeline for Adi Shankara, because this is inexact, but we are trying to be making it as exact as possible, by providing you scientific data, by doing the math behind it, doing the rigor that it requires to do this research. Remember that Dr. Manish Pandit is a doctor by profession. He does this thing out of hobby. And I think the world community is in great indebted to you, sir, for taking the trouble to look at all these things, because we need to know precisely when our history happened. And this is for not just Hindus, but Buddhists, Jains, everybody, the entire universe. Sanatanis need to know when this happened. In fact, Buddhism thrives more out of India than in India, if this is my opinion. And even today, despite all the geographical conflicts that India is having with China today, every Chinese always think that it is he can attain moksha if he comes and he were to ascend heaven from where Gautama Buddha was born. This is a belief. Doesn't matter whether you are a communist country or not. Everybody is a practicing Buddhist. You would be amazed as to how many shrines still exist in mainland China. Of course, at a time when there'll be normalcy,
Right.
we'll have to wait and see that. So all this is nice and warm and everything. So now let's try and look critically at the dateline that you're coming up with. Now, why do you say that the attainment of Nirvana of Gautama Buddha also establishes the timeline of Mahabharata?
Right. I'll just share my screen, actually,
Sure,
because
sure,
I think,
sure.
we really ought to come up with that. So, right. Now, what it is, the astronomy behind the dating of Gautama Buddha is based on the work done by my mentor and friend, Dr. Narahari Achar, and it features in chapter 15 of my first book on astronomy on 3067 BC. Of course, the theory on 3067 BC is my modified theory, but it is based effectively on the work, on the base of the work which was provided by Srinivas Raghavan of Madras University, Chennai University, and Dr. Narahari Achar. And the slides, of course, now I am presenting those completely de novo. Nobody has ever seen these before. These have been lying with me since last year to last year. when I went for the workshop to present these to the police in Uttar Pradesh, which is, everybody is interested in the Mahabharata, and certainly they're interested in Gautam Buddha. So I will just, come to the moot point straight away. First of all, let me just go step by step. So, what is the use of astronomy in dating epics and history? You could establish a limit for the epics. So, that is one important thing. And what do we mean by establishing a limit for the epics? Well, we mean, for example, Bhishma Moksha and Maghamasa. There are two references. This is Maghamasa is the lunar month. Two references, both mention it by name. Maghoyam Samanuprapto Masa Punya Yudhishthira is one of the verses, and which is coming in Anushasan Parva, chapter 153. I think it is verse 26 or 27 of the critical edition. And there is another verse, and they establish a limit of 3200 BCE, beyond which the Mahabharata cannot be dated. There is obviously no 5K BCE figure which is possible. This is the other verse. Shukla Pakshasya Chashtamya Maghamasasya Parthiva Prajapatte cha Nakshatre Madhyam Prapte Divakare, which I have put over here in red letters on one side of the screen. And that is from the Gita Press version, but both of them are effectively in sync with each other. Then we are talking about establishing the true narrative, true interpretation. So Sree ji knows very well, the narrative becomes a huge problem nowadays because everybody has their own agenda. We have no agenda over here. We are presenting you to the facts as they are, and we are allowing you to also, all the viewers, to make their own interpretation, but we are giving you a guide to what the interpretation essentially is. So for example, Mahabharata war must occur after Kali Yuga has started, according to 17 references shown in Chapter 1 of my book. Shows around 11 of them. And I'm just going to show one reference over here because this is just I'm just trying to set the narrative of what exactly I'm trying to say over here. And here is a particular very interesting verse which says, because are we talking about Kali Yuga present prior to the Mahabharata war? Has it already started prior to the Mahabharata war? So when Bhimsen injures Duryodhan mortally on the thighs, Balram and Krishna have the dialogue, and he says, Praptam Kaliyugam Vidhi Pratidhyam Pandavasya cha. So everybody in general, most of the Mahabharata daters, including the ones who are having different viewpoints, a lot of them know that this verse is there and it is correct. And there are other verses between Krishna and Karna, which are there on day 17 of the war, which also point to Kali Yuga already having been there. Now, most people, they don't like to have this verse on Kali Yuga, which is already there in the Mahabharata, so they ignore it. And this is from Shalya Parva. And so I'm just trying to give you why this is so important, all these sort of things. So for example, you've got on the left hand side of the screen, you got the traditional so-called dates of the war. And the problem is that you got traditional Kali Yuga of 3102 BCE, and then you got the Mahabharata war, because the problem is that verse, which we just pointed out, is telling you that Kali Yuga has already arrived at the time of the Mahabharata war. And this is something which a lot of people ignore. A lot of people have ignored this, and you can see it over here. And then from there, we are going to Gautama Buddha Nirvana. So this slide is giving you a bird's eye view of what we are trying to show over here. And note that the time between the Mahabharata war and Gautama Buddha Nirvana is, this has got to be around the 1150 year mark, right? Because that is again from Puranas. Yes, Sree ji.
So I want to add my own reference point. In one of the articles that Sri S.V. Badri wrote about Hathiram Mutt, we trace a book that was published in 1802 called Savale Jawab, which traced the history of the Balaji temple in Tirumala. Right. And in that, again, this was written by in Telugu, and we published the translation parts of it. And we have an infographic there that talks about the Kali Yuga having begun in 3102. Now, there is no reference provided in that document. I'm just finding it striking that that number has been validated on a totally independent source. And in that, they trace that Janamejaya, who is the son of Parikshit and who is the son of Abhimanyu, has actually comes and cleans the temple. He comes to the Tirumala. He was the first person to make it possible for people to have proper darshan of Balaji. And then for about 2,500 years, the Pandavas were the ones who were the Poshaks of this temple, the dynasty that succeeded the Pandavas. So this is the other story, totally independent. I just thought it's appropriate to mention
Perfect.
that there is a, the triage of the date 3102 BCE. I will shut up now and I'll let you continue.
No, you're absolutely correct, Shriji. Absolutely correct. You see this 3102 BCE, or you see minus 3101 in the software, it will always be minus 3101. That date has got a lot of people very excited for a lot of time, and Panchang makers take this to be the traditional date, start of the Kali Yuga. In any case, I mean, across India, that is what is happening. Nobody really takes any other date of Kali Yuga to have started at that particular point, is almost mandatory. Nevertheless, there are some other people who claim that the... Sorry, go on.
That is one of the things that the British tried to erase unsuccessfully. Right. When they came to India, they couldn't figure out what is this Kali Panchang. Please continue.
Right. No, absolutely. Again, see, so there are certain very interesting points which I want to make with that as well. Some people have attempted to eradicate this 3102 BC as the traditional year of Kali Yuga, which is rather unfortunate. But for one moment, let us assume that because there are certain verses which say that certain inferences people make that Kali Yuga must start at the time of the Mahabharata war, right? And then they try to shift that Kali Yuga back to 5000 BC and all these sort of other dates. The problem is that all those things are wrong. The assumption which is made over there, I'm just digressing very briefly, the assumption which is made over there, I don't have that verse over here, but it is based on Kali Yuga starting on a Pushya Nakshatra. That is the inference made anyway. I'm not going to comment whether it is right or wrong. And all I want to say is that if the inference is saying that it is a Pushya Nakshatra within the Mahabharata war timeline, then that is not such a big deal, because as we know about the three Pushya theory, which nobody is able to reproduce except us. You see, it is a sine qua non, and we had a debate on Twitter and a Twitter quiz a few days ago, where we pointed out that there are three separate Pushyas, and out of which the first and two Pushyas are different, and no Mahabharata dater, majority of them, are not taking those Pushyas separately. And that third Pushya would then be the Pushya of start of Kali Yuga, in case that was, one possibility. Nevertheless, I personally think that those are all conjectures, and they are interesting conjectures, no doubt, but they are not that powerful that they will displace the traditional Kali Yuga date. So far, at least, I cannot find any evidence for that. But the fact remains that we are saying Kali Yuga is on at the time of the Mahabharata war, so the Mahabharata war must occur after that. That is the problem, you see, which and therefore all these other dates, which I have just put in yellow over here at the left of my screen, 3137, 3138, 3139, 3140, 3143, and even 3162 BCE and 3163 BCE, all these dates are debunked from the start. You see, if one then takes that particular line of thinking, they will not agree to that, because they will point out something else. But I'm just saying that this is one interesting thing. Number one, so the timeline from Kali Yuga to the Mahabharata war to Gautama Buddha, and so I've shown that anyway. And why is that important? Is because of the true chronology. We want to establish true chronology. And there is a gap of around 1150 years between the end of the Mahabharata war and Gautama Buddha. So when astronomy proves 3067 BC to the date of the war, which satisfy most, if not all, of the external internal criteria, then how can Buddha be at 483 BC? See, this is a question which nobody asks. If you're able to prove the 3K BC deadline, then how can Buddha be there? Plus, when lineage lists of the mathas of Shankara, shown in our last session, we were talking about it, They prove Adi Shankaracharya at 509 BC. How can Gautama Buddha be at 483 BC? Indeed, how can he be even at 600 something BC? He cannot be. He has to be. There has to be a time difference between the two. Because remember, for viewers, Gautam Buddha has to establish a religion, and the religion has to spread, and it has to become a threat to Hinduism in certain parts, or the Vedic dharma, and then Shankaracharya has to come and re-establish his narrative. So I've just put over there a word locha, which is a very interesting word, I think, which is the correct word. There's some locha in the narrative being sent out by Western Indologists, I'm afraid. There's some terrific amount of nonsense which is being which is being put out by these people. Right. Now, some ground rules before we start that particular session, which is that the Julian calendar is used. This is from NASA's website, because a lot of people have been asking me, sir, does 3067 BC mean minus 3066? Why should we take 1 year less and all these sort of things? Why is it Julian calendar, not Gregorian calendar? Why is it Drik Siddhanta and not Surya Siddhanta and all these sort of things? And I just want to point out from the NASA website itself that the Julian calendar is used for all dates up to 4th of October, 1582. After that date, the Gregorian calendar is used. So for our purposes, we are using Julian calendar only and not Gregorian calendar. As far as possible, that is what we are doing. That is number one. The number 2 point over here, which is given, is that the Julian calendar does not include the year 0. So the year 1 BCE is followed by the year 1 CE is awkward for arithmetic calculations. And therefore, the nomenclature is that you subtract that 1 year, basically. So 3067 BCE becomes minus 3066. So I'm just going to show that over here. So what we have got is 3067 BC is the same as minus 3066. 1807 BC is the same as minus 1086. 1087 is BC is the same as minus 1086. There is no 0 year in AD and BC system. This is very important that people understand this, because I have seen astronomers putting out all sorts of things on this date and that date, and they mix up completely. So they say 3066 BCE or 1086 BCE when they mean actually the 1 year later. Anyway, this is just besides the point, because ultimately you have to establish in which 1 year you are establishing all the criteria. So whatever year that you may call that year, that is a different matter. But this is the standard nomenclature which is given by NASA. So this is very important. Right. Again, some ground rules. And this is just that winter solstice, I want to define it. Earth is tilted away as far from the sun as it will be all year. This is I should have put this in inverted commas, actually. That is the these are not my words, but this is the standard definition. And this results in the shortest day of the year. It is the longest period of darkness. It is not Makar Sankranti. I really want to point that out.
Is so that December 21st, isn't it? December 21st.
Exactly. So December 21st is the calculated winter solstice. And the observed winter solstice, which I'm just pointing out the next paragraph, it is in Western pagan cultures, the symbolic death and resurrection of the sun. So the sun appears to stand still for 3 days at calculated winter solstice when observed by us, and it moves only on the 4th day, which is the reason for the verse in the Mahabharata, which is the chapter 153 of Anushasan Parva, where Yudhishthir says in verse 5, Sa nireo gajapura dyajike parivartaha drishtva nivrittam adityam. So he leaves Gajapura, which is Hastinapur, Yudhishthir. So Sa nireo gajapura dyajike parivarta, along with the archakas, he leaves Hastinapur. Drishtva nivrittam adityam. Now, everybody knows what's the meaning of nivritti, you see. Nivritya adityam. So the sun is released. And what is it? Yudhishthir sees the sun being released. And what is the sun released from? This is a question nobody is able to answer. When you ask them this question, they say, oh, they immediately say, no, we don't know what you're talking about. But what it is that the sun appears to stand still for 3 days at winter solstice moves only on the fourth. It appears to move only on the fourth day. It not that it is not moving before then from our viewpoint, but the point is we cannot see it to happen, and it happens only on the fourth day. So this is important. Yes, sir.
One question.